Welcome to Not So New News. Come along with us as we continue to discover an Appalachian time gone by. Today's article comes from the town of Whitesburg and appeared in Letcher County's oldest newspaper, the Mountain Eagle. Volume 2, Number 46, Industrial Edition, Section 4, dated July 22, 1909. Page 14 is not named but continued in today's reading. Soldier, statesman, and attorney, Colonel L.H.N. Salyer. To write properly of the biography of a life of a man so full of incidents and the varied experiences as of this subject of this sketch will require more space than we can now spare. Colonel L.H.N. Salyer was born May 31, 1834, on Copper Creek in Scott County, Virginia, and was educated in the public schools of this country of his day, and previous to the Civil War attended college at Carlisle, Pennsylvania. When the tocsin of war sounded across the land, Colonel Salyer was studying for the bar, but he threw down his law books and with 101 of his friends and associates hitched himself to the Southern Confederacy. He enlisted in the 15th Virginia Infantry and was first commissioned a captain in the brigade under General Floyd. This brigade was soon consolidated with the 2nd Division of General Stonewall Jackson's Corps. On that fatal Saturday evening, when Stonewall Jackson was mortally wounded, he was present, and at about the same time received a saber wound across the head, and was rendered unconscious, and it was several days before he knew of the loss of his great leader. Perhaps there are few men living who were on hotter battlefields than Colonel Salyer. He was in the thickest of it at Fort Donelson in '61, Seven Pines in '62, Fredericksburg in '63, at Gettysburg and Chancellorsville, and at Antietam, and in the Wilderness he was at the front. Speaking of the terribleness of the fighting at Antietam and the miraculousness of which some escaped, Colonel Sanders said, quote, "At Antietam, the heaviest fighting was on the road from Sharpsburg to Championsburg. The contending armies surged back and forth along the road the whole day long. Shot and shell precipitated like hail the whole time. I thought not of death, and believe no other man did, though the blood and brains of our comrades kept constantly flashing into our faces. Yet some of us, provincially or otherwise, passed through the terrible stream of death without a scar. In a day or so, Captain Cleary and I passed along this battle-scarred and crimson-colored road. There was a large brick church building which stood near the center of the lane, and we eyed it closely, and to my honest opinion, there was not a spot on it the size of a man's body that was not pierced many times with bullets. In the beginning of the war, 101 men enlisted at the time I did, and at its close only 2 of them came out untouched by a shot, shell, or saber. In one battle I had 16 holes shot through my clothes." Unquote. When the war closed, Colonel Sanders returned to his home and was admitted to the bar, and at once entered on the practice of law. He soon rose to the top of his profession, and has often been referred to as the, quote, "the Blackstone of Virginia and Kentucky." Unquote. He came to Kentucky in 1884 and lived for 17 years at Hazard, Perry County. For 8 years he has resided at Whitesburg. He has been married 4 times, and his last and present wife was Miss Combs of Perry County. Colonel Salyer, despite his age, is still hale and hearty, and retains his memory when as a boy. Mrs. S. E. Baker of Whitesburg, Kentucky. One of the best. D. Daniel Fields. Attorney D. D. Fields was born in Letcher County, August 13, 1853. Just as he had started into school and was beginning to make a little progress, the late Civil War struck the country, and for 6 years the subject of the sketch was never inside of a schoolhouse where the school was in session. He had almost forgotten all that he had learned in the 2 to 3 months terms that he had attended. So at the age of 14 found him with no education and practically no means to get one. Everybody in this country then was poor, and the father of Dan Fields was no exception to the rule, being that he was very much a cripple. Being the youngest of a family of 14 children, about all the education he secured was obtained in the log schoolhouses in the section of his home. However, he managed to get enough to enter the profession of teaching and followed this for some years. On December 24th, 1872, he married the daughter of Joseph Mustelwatt, her mother being the daughter of Isom Cottle, one of the pioneer settlers of Letcher County. Mr. Fields lived on the farm until 1883, during which time he had learned the practical surveying, and about this time began work of this kind for W. D. Jones and J. B. Altimus, both of whom afterward became charter members of the well-known Mineral Development Company. He surveyed regularly for these parties until August 1886, when he was elected sheriff of Letcher County and served 2 years. Then he was engaged as an agent for Jones and Altimus and served them until 1891. In May 1890, he was admitted to the bar and at once began practice of law, and in 1892 he had entered the employment of Jones and Altimus as an attorney and served the organization of the Mineral Development Company, which took over the Jones and Altimus property. By this deal of the company became the largest landowner in Letcher County. Mr. Fields then entered the employment of said Mineral Development Company as an attorney and has held that position ever since and is one of its oldest employees. Mr. Fields and wife have 6 children and all married, 2 living in Virginia and the other 4 at Whitesburg. Of his 3 sons, the eldest in engineering and a proprietor of the Mountain View Hotel at this place, the second a lawyer, a third a merchant. Mr. Fields is still actively engaged in the practice of law and is probably the best known attorney at this end of the state. For the last few years he has been a prominent figure at most of the state and U.S. courts in Kentucky and has a large practice in the Court of Appeals at Frankfort. He is a member in good standing of all fraternal orders at this place. Prominent men in our coal regions. This concludes the reading of Part 2 of page 14 of the July 22nd, 1909 Mountain Eagle. We at Kentucky Tennessee Living would like to thank you for your continued support as we bring to you the history of the Appalachian Mountains.